Morning, everyone. This is the January meeting of the Washington Medical Commission business meeting. We'll start off with Amelia and her tidiness with housekeeping.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us for our business meeting today. This meeting is being recorded. The documents which will be discussed here today are available on the event calendar of our website, which is wmc.wa.gov. They are also available in the handout section of the webinar. I'm Amelia Boyd, and I am the program manager for the Medical Commission. Jimmy Bush and I are the organizers for this meeting. Panelists, please be sure to mute yourself if you are not speaking. Attendees are automatically muted. Please note that anything posted to the chat or questions section is considered public record. We will take public comment at this meeting. Once we get to that item, the chair, Mr. Malden, will read a script and will then ask for public comment. If you would like to comment, please use the raise your hand feature or add your comments to the question section. Our time for public comment is limited, and each speaker is likely to only have about 2 minutes to speak. And with that, I will hand it over to Mr. Malden for his chair report.
Thank you, Amelia. I have a couple of things to discuss. First of all, the March meeting will be virtual. We were undecided until recently. The governor has extended what he calls personal facing service, I think, which means no in-person meetings. Interesting term. But nonetheless, we will be virtual one more time. Just a reminder, Mike Hively sent out a note about the necessity of checking into your X drive once every 3 weeks. If you don't, the security of the X drive goes away and you'll have to take your computer into a service center for IT to have a look at it. So way more convenient just to every once in a while, just for fun, check into your X drive so that it remains secure and you don't have to go anywhere. During our retreat, we talked about the code of conduct. This week at executive committee, we made a few revisions to the code of conduct and put it in its final form. The most important change we made was the definition of ex parte, which has now been defined and is contained in the policy. And the reason for that is that there was confusion about what that meant to the point of not having any idea what ex parte meant. So a little bit of a change. And what it really means is that commissioners will not have any independent contact with respondents, complainants, their attorneys, witnesses, or anyone else associated with any particular case. Again, that's defined now in a footnote. There was one other slight revision dealing with the integrity or not questioning the integrity of individuals being reprimanded by the commission. So other than that, I think it's pretty straightforward. Again, the policy requires that the executive committee review it every 3 years. It does not require full board action. I'll be sending out a copy to everyone, so you can anxiously await the arrival in your email. With that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda can be found on pages 9 through 13 in your packet. It contains minutes from the November 19th business meeting, as well as approval of the agenda for January 14th meeting. Does anyone have any questions or any issues with the minutes of the prior meeting?
Move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Alden. Do we have a second? All in
Second.
favor? Second by a number of people. All in favor, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The new business, I think I'm not sure, or I'm not sure. Hopefully everybody had an opportunity to see the revised agenda packet that contains the FSMB resolutions. And I think Micah or Melanie, would you like to elaborate on those two items?
Sure. So as you can see there, you've got two resolutions in the packet. One of them is a sort of a retread. And to give background on this, in 2017, after you had adopted your guideline and policy for telemedicine, we submitted a resolution, I believe it was when Dr. Howe was chair, to the Federation of State Medical Boards for adopting the standards or the scenarios that you put forward in your policy about continuity of care. These are the university student, the traveling worker, someone on vacation, consulting at a specialty center like MD Anderson or something like that. And then also the border state scenario, and that's specifically what we're dealing with here. And when we say border state, we're talking the patient that lives in Vancouver and the doctor that's in Portland, and they normally go to see them, but maybe they have a phone call or a telemedicine visit. Technically, that's supposed to have a license in Washington, but in your policy, you chose to recognize that that is a normal part of continuity of care, and it wasn't reasonable to expect the patient to go and establish care with someone in Washington just because they have a one-off visit. The person with the history with them and the medical records with them, it makes more sense to be the person that treats them. And so we put that forward. Unfortunately, at that time, we were unable to go to the FSMB meeting and speak to that resolution due to, I believe this was the bathroom bill in 2017, where with the whole ACC tournament and all that stuff. So we were unable to speak to that. Conveniently enough, the FSMB has put forward revisions to its model telemedicine policy, and as it turns out, they have adopted almost all of your telemedicine policy positions and standpoints, with the exception of the border state piece. So this is not final as far as what FSMB has done. So in an effort to make sure that that very important piece for Washington is included, we've included this, I'm sorry, I've just realized that the other resolution is up right now. So in order to make sure that the border state piece is included, we wanted to put forward a resolution, the same one that we did before, but with an add-on to make sure that the model policy for FSMB focuses on the border state issue. So that's the as it turns out, the second one. The one that's in front of you right now is a concept called a National Medical Practice Registry. And so since 2012, FSMB has received HHS grants under the License Portability Grant process, and they've held various meetings and introduced various solutions. Some of those are the uniform application, of which we participate in. This has also helped with the Federation's Credentials Verification Service, which is like a primary source storage locker for all of your documents. And so whenever someone wants to apply to a new state, they can just tell FSMB to send all that there, and it's sent over there, and it's all primary source verified. This also is how the Medical Licensure Compact came into being, as far as the initial planning meetings and supporting the drafting, as well as what is coming in the form of a PA compact that's currently been drafted and getting comments. So this would be an extension of this. The resolution effectively says that FSMB should undertake a work group to look at establishing a medical practice registry. Now, what is a medical practice registry? If you go to other countries like, say, Canada, Great Britain, Australia, as well as a number of others, they have what is called a register. That's why all of their practitioners are not called licensees, they're called registrants. And so you complete your training, you go and you apply with the board, and you get put on the register. And that allows for practice mobility across multiple states. In Australia, they've got 8 states, 7 of which are mandated to be on the registry, and 1 of which has a memorandum of understanding that allows people to get on the registry. So they have true national practice. The issue with the registry is that you only have to get licensed one place, and then you get on the registry and you can practice nationally. And then the the governance of the registry is controlled by the regulators. They have set the standards for entry and the standards for removal. And so this doesn't prevent you from, say, getting licensed and practicing in multiple states through the medical licensure compact. You still have that option for license expediting. You would still have the option to go and get licensed state by state, the way that people do or did before the medical licensure compact. But this would simply call on FSMB to put together a work group to explore federal legislation to put together the concept of a registry to see if it's feasible. The benefits of a registry, aside from what I had talked about, is you would have the single license issue. You would still have the states taking care of the disciplinary aspects while still maintaining the connection with the practitioner. So it doesn't get into the complexities, let's say, of a PT or a nursing compact where they're dealing with compact privileges and not so much licenses. It would be much more nationally focused with respect to a single provider page that people could look at and verify who is licensed where. And in the resolution, it also speaks to having a single national complaint form where it would be filed at that provider site, but then the public-private partnership would route that to the various state medical boards for action. So it's a broad-reaching proposal. It's something that I've been working on along with the input of numerous others over a number of years. And so this is the resolution that we are trying to deal with. It's also probably most importantly dealing with the rise in federal efforts to make a national license through federal legislation. And I can't really emphasize that point enough. I've been in this space for over 10 years, and the number of bills that are looking at nationalizing medical licenses without answering the questions of what happens when something goes wrong, or how do you keep state boards viable when you conceivably potentially take away all of their funding mechanisms. This is the solution that would maintain that authority as well as the ability to operate, and would not create a disjointed system like these pieces of legislation are attempting to do. And when I say disjointed system, I mean allowing for federal license supremacy in DoD scenarios or VA scenarios, but not in others, or possibly in Indian Health Services scenarios, but not in others. And so this would make a normalized process across all scenarios with respect to license portability.
Are there comments, questions about the two resolutions? Yang Ling?
We can't hear you, Dr. Yu.
Be muted. While we're waiting for Dr. Yu, does anyone else have a comment or question? I see a hand, I think, Mike?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Dr. Pam Colemeyer, a new staff attorney, sent me an email yesterday pointing out that the last part of that, the last whereas on that page, and Amelia, if you could scroll down just to the bottom of that page. Actually, it's the other resolution. There's a funny sentence there. There you go. There's a problem with that last whereas state medical boards must come up with and lead adoption of a solution. So I recommend that Micah and I work on just fixing that sentence. Something like state medical boards must develop and lead adoption of a solution. You okay with that, Micah?
Absolutely. And so for those who are not familiar, while we're waiting for Dr. Yu, the process is the medical boards will recommend a resolution go to FSMB for their annual meeting in April. It's got to be done before the board certification, the board meeting for FSMB in February. It will then get sent to the reference committees where it will be debated, and then sent to the House of Delegates, where the delegates, of which Mr. Malden is the one for the Medical Commission, will debate and vote on either adopting or not adopting, tabling for further research and whatnot. So the language is likely going to change. It seems rare in my experience for a resolution to go through untouched. There's usually quite a bit of discussion about what should be changed or could we change this. But really, what I would make sure you focus on is not so much the whereases. Those don't matter so much as what the resolves are, and so just be aware of that.
And let me ask, Micah, did this this was put together in conjunction with other FSMB individuals or other boards, or was this done independently by WMC?
It's a discussion that's been going on between WMC to some extent, and or at least WMC staff and then staff with FSMB, a group called Centers for Telemedicine and eHealth Law. And then I've had conversations with, just informally, with a couple of other medical boards, just trying to kick that around. But the impetus really came from some interviews with leaders of medical regulators in other countries to understand just how their practice registries work, and then the intersection of the various telemedicine bills being proposed on the federal and state level, realizing where people seem to be going.
Yeah. Dr. Yu, are you now connected?
Yeah, I can't get my mic work on the web, but I'm calling in. So thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. My question is, I really think this is a really cool idea, and I hope I will be able to iron out some details how to coordinate with the state medical boards. My question is that, Michael, you mentioned that if there are some concerns raised by, let's say patients, they submitted to the registry board, then they will forward the information to the individual board. Does that take the state medical board function away for receiving any complaints or anything?
No, if you think about multi-state practice, the number one issue that state medical boards are concerned about is how do you determine, or how do you make sure that the patient has the ability to notify someone that something happened that was untoward or unwanted. And so instead of the proposal is really about the medical practice registry, the sub proposal is to make sure that there's a national complaint source, I guess, a national portal for complaints, so that behind the scenes it can be routed to the right individual. Because if you think about it, the registrar is going to have the understanding and the names and who they're associated with respect to states for all the licensees or registrants. So you as a patient, instead of having to track down what medical board is this person licensed with, you would simply go to the national registry portal and say, I want to file a complaint about this practitioner because I had a bad experience or whatever. And the registry would forward that to the state medical board, just like we get complaints forwarded, say, from DSHS. Someone filed a complaint, not with us, but they forward it straight to us, and we still deal with it as a report.
Yeah. Okay. So so if a patient or a general public want to find out any practitioner's information, they don't have to go to the state board website anymore. All they need to do is go to the National Registration Board website. Is that where we heading to, that direction?
They could do either. So here's the rub. This registry would have a higher standard than likely licensure. It's just like the medical license compact would. So you could potentially be a licensee with the state but not be on the state register. In other countries, this is what's called being erased from the register, because you don't qualify, or more likely you did some form of misconduct that gets you struck from the register. So it gets a little complex with respect to, is this person practicing across state lines? Are they authorized to do so? But really what we're talking about is enabling, that 97% of practitioners who do their jobs well to have true license portability, and whether that's via telemedicine or just being able to be mobile, or if they have multiple locations that they practice. And we've got quite a few that bounce from California to Oregon to Washington, just depending on where their procedures are scheduled. So,
Yeah.
so that's really what this is about.
So there would be a national, right now each state have its own rules what need to be reported when you apply a license or renew license. So if we have this national registry, there would be a national standard that would be required universally in every state, report the same thing, self-report, whatever is reporting requirement, right?
The state regulators would be the ones who would provide the governance for the registry, just like with the medical licensure compact. They would come up with the rules and the standards for entry. And so, just like I said, you could be on the register, but you not necessarily, or I'm sorry, you could be a licensee, but not necessarily on the register. And that's an important distinction. You don't have to participate in this as a licensee. The model that's being proposed in this resolution is the licensees don't have to participate, but all of the regulatory jurisdictions do. This doesn't work. This doesn't work unless all 70 jurisdictions are mandated to participate.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you for the information.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Additional comments or questions? I can't see all of the commissioners, so if you have a comment or question, speak up. Okay, sounds like we are good to go. So this requires action, so I'll entertain a motion to adopt the two policies.
One clarification, Chair Malden, the motion should be just to approve the resolutions to be forwarded to FSMB.
Sorry, that's what I meant to say. Sorry about that. Anyway, that's the motion.
I move what Micah said.
Thanks, Jim. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
You, number of seconds. All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
You, opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Micah, for the explanation. We'll move on to committee reports updates. The written reports are found on page 14. Are there any additions to the written reports in the packet? Anybody want to provide an independent update of your work?
I'm going to give an update. It's the series of lunch and learns. There's an education committee made up of commissioners that got together before the pandemic to sort of map out the sessions for the lunch and learns that we have on the Thursday of commission meetings. And due to the pandemic, that committee hasn't met for a couple of years. And so we have run out of lunch and learn ideas that were promulgated by this group. So taking matters into my own hands to make sure that you have lunch and learns, I have asked the staff to come up with some trainings, some 1-hour trainings to provide lunch and learns going forward that are more in-house type of training, etiquette at a hearing, or the CMT process, or the difference between a STID and an SOC process. So those things will pop up as lunch and learns. But if you would like to start that committee up, made up of commissioners, please let me know. Drop me an email that says you're interested in being on that education committee, and we will reconvene that in the future. But until we have a committee reconvened, those are the kinds of lunch and learns that you have. And I have heard from you over time that you would like more in-house kind of training, and this is a perfect place to do that. because you're all together on that Thursday. We can do sort of a focus training on a particular aspect of our processes or whatever interests you regarding staff process. The other ask that I have of you is if you have some sort of internal process that you would like to have a lunch and learn about, please also drop me an email and give me a list of things that you would like to learn more about, and we will make sure that we get staff to prepare a presentation for you sometime in the future. Thanks.
Yeah, and you don't have to be on the committee to have a good idea for lunch and learn. So if anybody has any thought, any independent thought, or any other concern, let Melanie know. Claire?
Yeah, one thing that occurred to me is that sometimes when we have papers by practitioners that are really excellent, there may be some ideas in there that would be helpful for the whole commission to hear. And we should just have an eye out to actually having someone present to the commission that we have found that way. Just, I know we've been struck by some of the academic papers being actually quite excellent. And there may be some ideas that are helpful to share among commissioners. Just an idea.
I think that's a good idea, Claire. I know we get a lot of papers that are really, really interesting. Even if you're not a doc, they're very interesting and you can learn a whole lot from reading them. So I agree with that thought. Other ideas or comments? Okay. Well, I was just going to mention, hopefully everyone had a chance to look at committees and work groups. There'll be an opportunity, I think, during our policy meeting update for some volunteers for additional work groups. Let's move on to rulemaking activities. Amelia?
So I do have one update from the report that's in the packet. The clinical support program rulemaking has now been rescinded, so we are done with that one. Thank you.
We don't need to have any formal action on any issue at this point. Correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Amelia.
Could I, this is Jim. Could I ask, what does that exactly mean? It's been rescinded?
That we aren't pursuing rulemaking anymore. We've closed the CR 101.
So that means it's progressing, not that it's no longer being considered.
Right, it's no longer being considered. Correct.
And I don't mean to be dense, although it's hard for me to say that, but so why is it no longer being considered?
You voted to rescind it at the last meeting because we were working, the draft language that was came out of the last workshop was outside of the scope of your established CR 101. And we've been working on that rule for a while. And so we weren't making any progress with it on top of the fact that we were working outside of the 101. So you voted to rescind it. And then if we want to later, we can pursue rulemaking on it. But at this time, we're not.
Okay. So pretty much the idea of what we're trying to pursue there is off the table at this point.
Mr. P.A. Anderson, I'm going to butt in, sorry. No, we're not doing a rule for clinical support, but we do have the authority in our statute to provide education to practitioners. So we are standing up a practitioner support program that provides education to practitioners that is not encased in a rule, but we are going to provide education regarding, for example, complaints that we get that are about record keeping. And if we don't open it at CMT, we close it, we will provide the practitioner with some education about best practices on keeping medical records. So kind of the same thing without all of the rulemaking, because in 7 years we couldn't get a group of commissioners to agree on the wording for that rule, and it was not moving forward. So we thought that we would go a different direction, but it's not, the concept isn't dead. We're just going a different direction.
Thank you. Thank you. That's helpful.
Could I ask a question, John?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, please.
I saw in a package, policy committee's package, there's one, I don't have that right in front of me. It seems like that seems the purpose of that particular policy is to provide a route similar like the education WAC that we were talking about, because that seems like any licensing board, health or whatever the board, if you have a concern during the investigation, or they can require a remedy for certain conditions. And so could Michael, anyone clarify, is that what is a similar purpose for the education WAC that we have been discussed for a long time?
Sure. This is Mike Farrell. I'm going to recommend, and the policy committee is going to recommend, that policy that you're referring to regarding notices of correction, which is kind of close to what we're talking about, and I'm not surprised you raised it, but that you rescind that policy, and I'm going to explain why. And I think the effort that Melanie just described to you is a better way to go to achieve your goal, rather than using that tool of notice of correction. And I'll explain why later.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I was confused.
Yes.
I thought that's where we're going.
Yeah, Dr. Yu, it is on the policy committee agenda, so it will be discussed.
Okay, thank you.
I want to back up to committees and work groups. I meant to say something about joining a committee or work group. They are listed in your packet, so if any of you have any interest in joining a committee or a work group, please let me know, and we'll make arrangements to assign you, or if there are individuals who no longer want to be on a committee or work group, let me know, and we will make those arrangements as well. Hopefully we won't lose anybody. We would love to gain some folks. Moving on to public comment.
Before you do that, John, it's Chris Blake. I just wanted to call out the Melanie's report that she put in on staff reports. Pretty impressive numbers of licenses that were granted, 4,370, and 486 investigations. I just think that those numbers are pretty impressive when I read those. So that was a lot of work done.
I agree, all of the numbers are pretty impressive. Lots of work going on. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut anybody else off. Anything else to discuss along those lines? All right, let's move on to the public comment period. We will now begin the portion of the business meeting to take public comment. The purpose is to allow members of the public to directly address the commission on issues of public concern. Please refrain from providing comments on pending or open investigations or disciplinary cases. We will not be answering questions or responding. Staff will be available after the meeting to answer your questions. Please understand that although the time period for comment during the business meeting is limited, the public can attend and provide comment at commission committee meetings. The public can also contact staff during normal business hours. We welcome written comments as well. Each commenter will have 2 minutes to speak. When you comment, please state your name and who you represent. Would anyone like to comment at this time? Amelia, do we have anybody signed up?
No, there are no hands raised and no questions in the questions box.
Include the public comment portion of the meeting. With that, we will move on to policy committee report with Dr. Domino.
Good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. We had a very interesting meeting yesterday in discussing the 4 agenda items. To begin with, the first item is the one that relates to discrimination in healthcare. The policy committee and others really feel this is an incredibly important policy statement. And there was quite a bit of discussion about it. Dr. Roberts had also made some revisions to it, and I don't know if those are the ones that we're showing. It's basically on page, let me say this is page 19 to 22 of your document. But on the last 2 pages of it, in particular, what was he recommended is to not tie the hands of the commission in terms of deciding upon some sort of how to deal with the complaints, such as remediation versus a STID versus this or that. And as a result of the discussion, we felt that it was important to form a work group about it. And anyone who's interested in being a work group, the more the better, really, to get different opinions. That you may not be able to make a meeting, but you certainly can reply via email if you're unable to when a meeting needs to be set up, which will be soon, to be able to have comments. And so we basically are putting this to a work group to come back to us with a new document. We did want to open it up to comments from commissioners to hear some other ideas, and any of those people who were there yesterday as well who wish to say something, feel free to do. I don't necessarily see everyone's little picture on my small screen, so if I don't call on you and someone isn't talking, please just say hi, just come in and speak. Yes.
Dr. Domingo, before we start with that, I do want to go over the list of folks that I have currently from yesterday's policy committee that would like to be on a smaller work group to review this more in depth. And I'm gonna, I have P.A. Anderson, Dr. Curry, Christine Blake, Scott Rogers, and Dr. Roberts currently listed as folks that want to be on this work group. We will be putting together a meeting invitation to try to get a meeting that we can all attend. So for those folks that weren't on the policy committee yesterday, if you could let me know if you also want to be part of this work group, I will include you in that session. So I just need to know who else would like to be a part of the work group that looks at this more in depth.
Arlene?
Arlene?
Yeah, I'd like to be a part of the work group.
Thank you.
This is a disparity one?
It's discrimination, yes.
Discrimination. Yeah, I would like to be on.
How that it deals with disparities. It also deals with, there was, Dr. Bundy brought up the issue of discrimination against people who have disabilities as well as racial and ethnic discrimination.
Yeah, I would like to be serving on, to help out on that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, this is Dr. Trescott. I'd like to be on it. It's going to be a busy group.
It will be a big group, but I think one thing is it's sometimes those are harder, but we really want to get a variety of opinions about it. And a lot of these sort of details can be worked out through the internet and different things and other discussions if people can't make a meeting. That's one of the biggest challenges, is to arrange a meeting with multiple people at short notice. When we're all,
and this is one group that really does need diversity.
Yeah. So we that's what we're interested in. Does anyone have any comments about it that you'd want to share, or you want to just go and have the work group work on it and we'll bring it back to policy? Yeah, Arlene?
Yeah, we had a very compelling case yesterday that kind of leaned in this direction, and it was noticeably difficult for us all to talk about. So I really think that the more time that we spend devoted to becoming comfortable with honest and frank discussion that will help us to move forward on this would be the most beneficial. So yeah, well done and full speed ahead.
Thank you. Any other comments? I don't see anyone, but please feel free to say something if you wish.
Could I make comments?
Yes, I see you now in the corner. Yes.
Thank you. I think to have a work group would be really good to iron out some really, it's complicated issue. Sometimes the case came into us, like we just had a case, it's actually my case. I'm not talking about the detail, but it sometimes fall on the borderline, and those unconscious bias and people just not thinking about it. And what is the best action to take? I think it would be a great value to have a committee like this to work out some guidelines.
Thank you for your comments and your interest in being part of the work group. Anyone else, or should we move on to our second policy item?
I would say one thing is that I'm not always comfortable with our redacting, and I'm curious about whether it makes us better or worse at finding health inequities if we are so redacted. Just I'll be interested if anything comes up on that.
Yeah, Claire, I think it's an interesting point. I find it much more difficult with the redacting. To me, we miss seeing important items, but I don't know what others think. It is, theoretically, it may seem more objective, but to me, you lose a lot that may be quite important.
Yes, if there are health inequity issues in there, it can be now hidden more than it was in the past.
I would agree, Dr. Trescott comments, and I sometimes found it difficult to evaluate. I think there are some information on the gender, the age, and I think that are important to look at it as a whole picture when you evaluate the case.
Well, I think that's something the group should definitely consider. Yeah.
I almost think we should have a screening for health inequities as part of redaction then, to try to pick it up as the information is being blacked out.
Diana?
Commissioners, this is Micah. I just want to point out that we actually do have a process for that, and it's housed with our Equity and Social Justice Manager, Mahi Zuru. She does review the non-redacted complaints before they go to CMT, and she does provide an assessment about a discrimination impact for your consideration, either written or verbal at CMT. So that is happening with respect to making sure that things are not missed there.
So she sees them, Micah, she sees them before they're redacted, is that what?
That is correct.
Right. I have never seen anything that's been picked up that way, and we've been informed that there may be a discrimination involved in this one. Has that happened on any?
I have. She will include articles even that speak to, say, discrimination against people of color in the ER, for example, if she thinks it's relevant. But also we have our new intake question so that complainants can self-identify if there's any concerns that they have for discrimination. So hopefully that will also help us get pointed in the right direction. But I think Mahi is doing a really good job of pre-reviewing for potential.
And just to clarify on Dr. Curry's comment, so now when you're doing a complaint form online, if you check discrimination, it automatically brings up a list and a question stating, please specify what areas you feel were discriminatory. And there's an entire list ranging from race to housing status. So they can much better dial in where the discriminatory aspects were, which I think will absolutely help you and help staff with respect to assessing a complaint and directing an investigation.
Micah, I wonder if the commission, you could send this around to the commissioners, because I certainly I've heard of it, but I wasn't aware of what details were requested. I only thought there was one question and not a whole list. Is that something?
I might actually have it up right now. If Amelia will let me share my screen, I can do that.
I think it would be good to have this information go out to the commissioners, that this is occurring behind the scenes, because I wasn't aware of it.
I think, yeah, Jimmy sent it out a while ago, Claire. I know I got it. Yeah. Could do it again.
Yeah,
okay,
if you
we'll
could
send
do
it
it
out.
again,
We'll send it out.
Lost, right? Easy to get rid of emails by accident and not read them thoroughly.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, any other comments about this? Nope. Okay, we will move on to our second document, which is on page 23 to 24. And it was called Termination of the Practitioner-Patient Relationship. There was a lot of discussion about this document as well. And we also referred it back to have a work group work on this, since there were a number of issues that were brought up. And those include, in particular, providing records to patients. There's some discussion about having the practitioner provide records to patients. However, for those, since many practitioners are working for large healthcare organizations, we don't own these records. The healthcare organization owns them. There's questions of how long one should retain this, the 7 years, I guess, statute of limitations, or something more practical. There were suggestions about having WISMA look at this because it would impact practitioners. And let's see, those were the things I jotted down about it. Anyone have some comments who were there yesterday, in case I forgot or didn't write down other things? Dr. Roberts?
That it's not really up to the practitioner that's terminating a relationship to find another physician for that patient. I don't think it's, at least I don't think it's the role of that practitioner, because a lot of times this occurs in a contentious nature, and you don't want to be sending this to your normal referral group or any of a variety of other things. And so generic response would be a reasonable thing, but not you need to find somebody else.
Yeah, thank you. There was a sentence there which was in and out called, the practitioner should consider providing the patient with names of other practitioners with their consent, or provide physician referral resources. And that one was also an issue as well. Yes, Dr. Small.
So just a comment regarding providing records to patients. There is, I used to know this by heart when I was doing community mental health work, but there is somewhere in RCW circumstances under which a practitioner can decline to provide records to a patient and instead offer to send them on to the next clinician. So I just suggest looking that up before potentially putting anything in here that is contrary to what's in RCW.
Thank you. Any other comments about it? Sometimes one of the things that came up at the meeting was that this is often a disruptive patient, and the physician or PA doesn't get along with this patient, and try this whole thing of the referral, the records can be very time consuming for them. They may not be able to do it in the first place, and it may be thousands of pages, excuse me, in the electronic health record. So those are some of the issues there. So if any other comments about this? I don't see any. If you are interested in this, please let us know. To who would like to be the one who receives these. You certainly feel free to email me, and I can refer it on to work group. Dr. Roberts, you were on this work group as well. Is that right?
Yes, thank you. I can hardly wait.
Yeah, that's what you get for being the big cheese and chair of the commission. So anyway, that was referred on. Now we have two other ones which were shorter discussions. The next one we'll talk about is self-treatment or treatment of immediate family members. This was on page 25, 26. And this one we had previously approved last year, and that Mike Farrell had received a comment from a practitioner dealing with the issue of electronic health records and accessing records of their own records from their Epic system or other thing, as opposed to their patient portal or those of family members. And apparently there have been people who've been let go and fired from their organization for using something like Epic, which you have access to as a practitioner, to assess their own medical records. So we wanted to make it clear to the practitioners that this is, is something that they need to really watch out about doing. It's fine to use your patient portal, but not to use your Epic sign-in that you use to access your own records or those of family members. So their change was there. We went through a bunch of different renditions of this change. You could see it there. It says practitioners, who should not access the medical records of themselves or their family members. And so there was another change as well. Mike, you want to? Yeah. You had your hand up.
Yes. The change that Dr. Domino just read was what we came up with last night. The word "who" shouldn't be there, but I got an email from Dr. Small yesterday who pointed that out, and then had a suggestion. And maybe Bob, you can explain what your suggestion is, and then I'll talk about the next suggestion.
Okay, so my suggestion is what is on the right-hand page there in blue underneath the paragraph, to basically say it's okay for practitioners to access medical records of themselves or their family members in the circumstances that are described in that above paragraph. It seems to me incongruous to say that there are some limited circumstances in which practitioners could self-treat or treat family members, but then to say they can't access those records. So my suggestion was to put in some wording, again, that would say that it's reasonable for practitioners to access records just in the limited circumstances in that particular paragraph.
Yeah, we had something very similar to that in there, and it ended up being cumbersome and deleted it. So I think that seems reasonable. What about other commissioners?
Yeah, I thought we had something in there about outside of a therapeutic or doctor, provider, patient, whatever relationship.
We got
because
out.
Yeah. Why did we cut that? Now I don't remember why we cut that out, but acknowledging, the rural kind of places where people might actually be treating their family members because there's just no one else there.
I think I think what I recall and what I wrote down, because I have a lot of scratches on my paper about it, we were trying to stick it in the sentence where the red is above that paragraph, and mention in particular, it was outside of accepted treatment relationship, also except by a patient portal, and it ended up getting complicated. And I think that's why finally, after another discussion, we came up with that. Does anyone object to what Dr. Small says there? It seems to be straightforward.
Can I ask a question about, so is the document on the right the one that the latest version that we're working on?
Yes.
Okay, so the sentence,
red.
so the sentence in red, is that actually a sentence, or is that like the title of a section? Or
No, it's a sentence. It just looks underlined because of the tracking.
Yeah, but it's not a full
the one in blue would replace the one in red, so the one in red would be deleted.
Okay, but it says practitioners who should not access the medical records of themselves or their family members.
The who didn't belong there. That was just an inadvertent error.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's implied that you shouldn't access medical records of themselves or family members through unethical or non-conventional methods, but it doesn't, like as somebody mentioned, like what if you're just getting access to your records through your own, My Chart portal or something? I mean, that doesn't seem like it would be inappropriate. So I guess I do feel like that needs to be clarified.
Yeah,
and
Jimmy,
I don't disagree with Dr. Small's point suggested. I don't think I disagree with that either. So that sounds good.
Yeah, I like the change, but we did also have a statement in there about clarifying that we don't mean you can't access through your MyChart portal, for example. And then we took that out too. I'm wondering if we need to put that back in if it still comes up as a question mark in people's heads.
I think we should, to be honest, because I wasn't aware of that as a practitioner, that there's a difference. Since I don't use the portals myself, too many.
And is there also clarification in terms of what medical treatment means? Like, for example, if my child, needs medication that's over the counter, and I look up on, her or his MyChart, so I'm accessing my family member's medical records to see what the last, CBC was, and then I decide, okay, I think I'm going to have to give her Tylenol. Is that considered treating and also accessing medical records? And I'm just kind of like, I know I'm being
You're approved practitioner through the medical portal. That was a lot of our discussion. That,
anybody can go through a portal.
Child or elderly parent or someone who's sick. That's how you go through the medical portal, right?
The idea is to separate your role as a provider who has access to the record via their provider privilege of login directly versus you're a patient or a patient's guardian, son, daughter, parent, who goes through the patient portal, which is a separate sort of role and access point to the EMR. And trying to distinguish those. So I think we should put it in.
Say that in the document is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree.
The document doesn't reflect that.
So the one thing that
I think the point is you can't access in a way that any patient couldn't access. You can't use your power as a clinician to access the electronic medical record for a family member, even if it's looking up something that's over the counter or otherwise. And you can be fired for that in some organizations. That misuse of your privilege of being able to access medical records.
I think we're all in agreement. I'm just saying, how do we put that into a document?
Well, I'm wondering if we.
Cumbersome. And the other thing, the language patient portal, that isn't an obvious language that everyone would understand either.
Yeah.
And it may not be the same language in all EMRs.
I think
I think we can overthink this if we're not careful. This is a policy, and the enforcement of that is dependent upon us as commissioners. So you don't have to take action against somebody because they went through a portal to do things. I think it's important to give people direction, but we can overthink this and never get out a policy. And what we really need to do is to warn people about accessing their medical records.
That's precisely the point, Alden. I think that any discipline with regard to accessing or inappropriate accessing records is left to the individual's employer, if you have one.
But there have been people who've apparently been fired for this, which was a surprise to me.
No question about it. My point is, it's not the commission's responsibility to have discipline for doing that. It is up to their employer. What we're doing is providing information with regard to what you should and should not do.
There are times when it does become the commission's job. If somebody isn't charting, if somebody is taking care of people inappropriately, and it comes to our attention, it can become our job. But the primary place where this gets enforced is going to be locally at either the hospital level, the clinic level, or whatever else. I think it's important to warn people not to do this. I think to get it so that nobody can misunderstand it is going to mean we never get it out.
So
I liked Dr. Small's suggestion to just get rid of the red and replace it with the blue. I think it's much easier to read. And Scott, this is what I was telling you, that you were taking over Dr. Small's job as being the editor of these documents. That some of you have a good eye for language on these. And this does become our job, because I know in some organizations, if a clinician is let go for anything like this, then they feel it's their job to report it to us because they've been let go for cause. So anyway.
So I just want to add in that for what it's worth, if you like the blue sentence, that's combined effort of Mike and myself. That wasn't solely my composition.
But you are the word police, Bob. I do, and Scott Rogers has kind of taken over that role if you're not in the room. So just want you to know that.
Mike Farrell, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, Heather Carter just suggested to me that you could add a footnote explaining that this does not apply to the appropriate access of patient portal, something like that.
That's a good idea, I think.
That's a good idea. Scott.
I don't want to follow up with another suggestion if we're getting ready to pass this. Is the expectation we'll approve this today in this meeting?
Well, that's the thing. It depends how much agreement there is on this. I mean, if an exchange of a sentence and a footnote to me seem something that's possible to approve, perhaps, if the commission feels that way. If it's going to be a bunch more, I think we could bring it back next time.
I would not want to.
Approved, it's just, something I think we need to let people know about.
I don't want to hold it up. I just a quick suggestion that the footnote might distinguish what I think is some of the back and forth on this, is that it might say something like physicians have extraordinary access to patients' records, even records that they might not otherwise have a right to access, and that the difference is, do you have access by virtue of having credentials on a computer system versus are you a treating or a consulting physician on the matter? But I think we
clarifies it more
today.
I don't know what people think. I mean, we could take a vote on this with a small footnote. I think a big footnote needs to bring back to the policy committee to wordsmith. I don't think 6 weeks is going to make a huge difference. It will allow people to wordsmith a footnote to make it clearer. Any feelings about it? Anyone want to? I mean, my preference is to bring it back to policy and bring it back to you guys.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, this is something that easily gets complex, as we've already demonstrated a few times.
Yep. Okay, so we'll do that. And then the last item, Mike Farrell was talking about before. We voted to rescind this policy from the policy committee. And Mike, you want to go a little bit more about the issues? You mentioned some of them earlier.
Sure, I'm happy to. The policy committee is recommending that you rescind this very old policy and get rid of this tool that is really not a good fit for healthcare licensing. And a little bit of background, back in the mid-90s, businesses who were being inspected by state agencies were complaining that an inspector would come in, find a violation of some regulation, and then impose a fine. And they said, this is really unfair. We should get a warning and a chance to correct the violation without a fine. So the legislature back in the mid-90s engaged in reg reform. And one of the things they came up with was a process for inspections where violations would be found. They would be given, the business owner would be given a notice of correction, and they'd be given a certain amount of time to correct the violation. And then the inspector would come back in. If the problem was fixed, they were good to go. If not, they'd get a notice of violation and have to pay a fine. Statute listed the agencies that this applied to, and it included the Department of Health. So there was a discussion within the Department of Health, which does plenty of investigations, whether it applied to boards, commissions, and programs that license healthcare providers. And the decision at that point was, yes, it does. And that this would be a tool that boards and commissions and programs could use. It made some of the attorneys uncomfortable because there's no due process in this process. If you have a license, you have a property right and you're afforded due process. But if you get a notice of correction, there's no avenue for appeal or hearing or any objection. You just get it. It's not disciplinary action. It's not posted on the website, but it is a public document. We decided back then that we would use it in narrow circumstances, and hence this policy, which is before you. It's actually a lot older than 2009. We rarely use it. It's really not a good fit. My personal opinion is it was never meant to apply to a professional license. It just doesn't fit because there's no due process. And so in looking at this and giving it the every 4 or 5 year review, and then talking about it with Kyle and Rick in legal and with Melanie, we decided since it's not a good fit, since it does raise risk, since it raises due process issues, and since you don't use it, let's just get rid of it, and it will be replaced by what Melanie talked about earlier, this ongoing education program, which we will tailor exactly to our needs.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone have any comments or further questions about it?
Mike, does that statute, the original statute, still exist, and does it still have the DOH listed as an agency that has to comply with it?
Yes, it does. It still exists. It's used, and it's used very appropriately by agencies that go in and inspect and look for violations. Yes.
So if we don't have a policy on it, then does that mean we're not in compliance, or is it up to us to just get rid of this and be totally okay with that?
Yeah, you can choose not to use this tool, and by getting rid of this policy, that's what you're doing. You're choosing not to use the tool. The tool still exists. You're not in violation of the law. It's just an option.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Yu? Sorry, we don't hear you.
Sorry, I muted myself. Just follow up on Mike's comments about due process. Maybe you can clarify, in other states, there are some remedial procedures like letter of concerns or, those type of things. those are not court challenges, right? Those are just board handed out to say we were concerned about your practice, some minor something, and then that's it. Is that right?
Yeah. So many states have statutory authority to issue a letter of concern when closing a case. And in many states, those letters of concern are not public. Some they are, but some they're not. So in those states, a medical board, if they want to close a case but express a concern, they can do so in a letter. It goes to the respondent. There's no appeal right, but the letter isn't public. Some of them have been challenged, but we don't have statutory authority to issue a letter of concern.
Okay. Yeah, right. Yeah, I know that. I just saw that, some of them, my understanding is that they don't have a due process also for them to challenge in court, as I remember. I'm just trying to see if I'm right, to see if you remember. I know California has licensing concerns, but they're public records. Some state, Oregon, are not, Texas. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of different models out there. One model is you get what they call letter reprimand in one state, and the respondent has the opportunity to just accept it, or they can challenge it. The letter is withdrawn, they get a statement of charges, and they have a right to a hearing. So there's different ways that states can make sure that their licensees have a process by which to challenge the action.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments about this? Any further discussion? The policy committee voted to rescind this policy. We take a vote of us as a commission. Yeah, how many of you are in favor of rescinding the policy? Raise your hand or say aye. And anyone opposed? I don't see any hands or anything, so, well, we rescind this policy. Thank you, Mike, for explaining it to us. And that's all the policy report.
Thank you, Dr. Domino. I'm always surprised when I read the policy committee packet. I thought, well, this will be a 15-minute meeting. It seems like the issues pick up speed sometimes as comments generate other comments. So anyway, interesting meeting yesterday.
Yeah, it was a long meeting yesterday. I was tired after the day.
It was long. Let's move on to member reports. A little free form. Raise your hand if you have something you'd like to raise for the committee or some issue that you're dealing with. I can't see everyone's beautiful picture, so.
Maybe I say something. I know that there's an organization, Patient Safety Action Network. They follow up on a consumer report several years ago on to evaluate state medical board website and how they transparent to the consumers and how information are easily accessed by the general public. So they did a rating for our state medical board, follow the same type of algorithm they did, consumer report did, and they send out to all state medical boards. So I assuming our board also received it. There was interesting about their study they did. So I just gave a heads up on that.
Thank you, Dr. Yu. Are there other comments? Okay. Staff reports are found on pages 33 to 41. Are there updates from staff with regard to your individual responsibilities? Micah?
I'll defer to Dr. Roberts.
I just had a couple of questions about some of the staff reports. The first is that, and I may have missed this, what is the grand jury subpoena from the USAG's office? Is it related in Mike's report? We couldn't tell what that was.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm not I had registered as a member this morning and not a panelist. So, but that being said, the grand jury subpoena was for some DOC records that we had received. It's nothing related to commission rather than a respondent.
Okay, the second one that I had was from Marissa, and it is, first of all, thank you for the work that you're doing. But the second is that you list the number of license issued, but Panel L has been fairly active, and I don't have any concept regarding how many licenses were either denied or withdrawn, or applications withdrawn. Would it be possible to get that sort of information? At least get it to the Panel L.
Micah, you may need to respond to that.
That's not a problem. Yeah, we absolutely can get that to Panel L. I think the withdrawn would be difficult to put out, but we certainly could, once things are final, note if applications have been denied or if they've been issued, if licenses have been issued with conditions.
Yeah, what I was referring to with withdrawn is when we send back questions that suggest that things might not go the way the respondent wants, the application might get withdrawn. And if we had a mechanism for tracking that, and we may not, but if we did, that basically comes under the same category as denied. And I think it would be important for us to know what we're doing.
Right. Just to clarify, withdrawn and denied, especially within the licensing system, are two significantly different things.
Absolutely,
that's why I delineated withdrawn applications to Panel L, denied applications to the public-facing report.
Right. For the rest of the commissioners, a withdrawn application is just withdrawn and there are no consequences. A denied application goes to the data bank and is reported nationally. I would really encourage commissioners to look at the staff reports. There's generally a lot of good information and often a lot of good statistics that are in there. So please take a look at these things. They actually are important. Thank you.
Right. And so I actually have my hand up after Dr. Roberts, and I'll just pile on. The first thing is the notation by, I believe it was Dr. Curry, about the number of licenses. The number of licenses issued on at least on the calendar year, is impressive, even to my perspective, simply because I've been watching the growth of licenses issued over a number of years. So I dug into the numbers a little bit. Just as few as, I believe, 3 years ago, we were issuing around 2,300 licenses a fiscal year. This year, we issued over 2,200 licenses, MD licenses alone, not including medical compact, not including PAs, and not including residents, fellows, teaching and research. So it really is a legitimate increase in the number of licenses issued. We can attribute that, one, to growth of people completing medical school and residency, but two, we can attribute that to a little bit to the pandemic, because people came in either they started through the Volunteer Healthcare Practitioner Act, where they volunteered their services and affiliated with an organization to provide usually telemedicine services. This is OHSU, Legacy, and others. And then as the pandemic went on, they decided they wanted to maintain those practice privileges. And so they either went through the traditional process or through the medical license compact processes. So the reason I bring this up is this is an increased patient access to care that is here to stay. They're intending to be here long term. So that's something I wanted to point out. And I wanted to give kudos to the licensing unit. They really are churning and burning through these things, and they are working hard to refine their processes. If you're not aware, they went from paper to paperless in the pandemic, in the middle of being assigned to work from home and not being able to come into the building. So that's been a pretty huge transition, and they've done it with great skill and care, and I really appreciate what they're doing. So with that, I'll move on to a clarification on my report. Once again, Becca King moved due to her husband's redeployment to Mississippi, so she is no longer with the commission. Kayla is handling some of her duties to facilitate payroll and travel for you all, so you'll be hearing from her more frequently. And then finally, I wanted to introduce Dr. Pamela Colemeyer. With the departure of Ariel, we had a little bit of a hole with respect to someone working with Panel L, and so she's going to be working in a staff attorney role. It just so happens that we were amazingly fortunate to get someone who is also a physician, and so she's going to be working in my shop. Her staff attorney mentors are going to be her attorney mentors are going to be Melanie, Heather Carter, and then primarily Mike Farrell, who Mike Farrell also, as you may not know, serves as our presiding officer over brief adjudicative hearings. So basically, whatever work Dr. Colemeyer does is going to get sent down the line should there be a denial or some sort of an adjudicative process to Mike, who will serve as the presiding officer. So he's training her from soup to nuts, effectively, and with respect to the license process and the Medical Practice Act. So there's a lot of history there. Melanie certainly is going to be her mentor as well, and then Heather can certainly educate her on the APA, the OPMA, I'm sorry, the Administrative Procedures Act, the Open Meetings Act, and any other items that may happen. But so I'm going to turn it over to Pam to introduce herself and introduce herself to you. Pam.
Thanks, Micah. Can you hear me okay? So my name is Pam Colemeyer. I'm a physician and an attorney. I was board certified in emergency medicine for 20 years, practiced actively for 15, and loved teaching in medicine, and decided to go to law school at not a young age. And I graduated from Gonzaga, who won last night. 3.5 years ago, when I was graduating, I took a job at Eastern teaching health law and professionalism. And this last year, I also taught on health inequities. And I did forget to mention when I got introduced at a meeting last week that I did do some legal work for an FQHC while teaching Chaz Health, for those of you that know Eastern Washington. I did something kind of similar to what you do, but on a smaller scale, looking at better ways to practice safely with providers, did kind of like clinical risk management for them, and also interpreted state law to help internal policy making. And with the pandemic, saw a need to kind of shift from academia, which I've been teaching for 3.5 years, to doing something active to try to help the community. Very, very active with, I co-chair the DCAC in Spokane. I also co-chair the Eastern Washington Crisis Standards of Care Regional Triage Team, which we're hoping doesn't have to be activated, but very happy to join you all. So thank you.
Thank you. Any additional updates from staff? Jimmy, a question?
Yeah, a comment and a question. I just wanted to point out the data in Jimmy Bush's report for 2021 annual performance. And first, just give huge kudos to all of our staff, including the investigation team and our staff attorneys, for such an improvement in also the licensing team too. Just you know, for example, the time to issue a credential going from 3 months to 2 months, and all of the other improvements that you can see there. I thought it was really exciting to see. Maybe I'm looking at a different page than what you're showing there, because the page that I'm looking at has a lot of performance metrics. Oh, there it is. Okay. The other thing, the question that I have is, and I don't need to make any implications, but how does this compare to pre-pandemic? Because I could also understand that during 2020, there might have been a lot of constraints that may have limited our staff's ability to perform at their peak. And so is this truly a really improvement in our performance, or is it us recovering from the peak pandemic years of 2020? So that, I guess that's my question underneath the kudos that I wanted to give to our staff.
I think it's a little bit of both. just in a very broad, general kind of term. So licensing is like everyone's saying, they're rock stars, and that is, I mean, that's a change from pre-pandemic times. You know, it was taking 10 to 12 weeks to issue a license before the pandemic. And, you know, so they're doing a great job, but we're receiving more complaints. Since I have worked here, in probably, you know, the past 10 years, we've averaged about 1,500 complaints a year. And now we're receiving 1,800. So there are, things like licenses, complaints received are up, but the rest of the performance is relatively stable. I'm just trying to quickly look at this again. I'm happy to send you previous year's reports if you would like to look at them. But outside of applications received and complaints received, there's not a significant change in the performance.
So
Yeah,
I'll
thank you.
also add a little bit. You've issued more STIDs in 2021 than you had in the past 10 years. So that is an increase in STIDs. Although our investigation numbers, we may have had fewer investigations, the investigations we did, you took action in more of the cases. So there is that measurement as well.
Yeah, I think all I can say is I just want to thank all the staff for doing such a great job in improving our performance. And I would just say that hopefully the commissioners will also work harder to help you guys and get things done more expeditiously. And I'm maybe speaking for myself, but I'll try to do better.
Other comments, questions about staff reports? All right, let's move on to the last item on our agenda, and that's Heather Carter, who may provide a report.
And I do not have a report for you today, so thank you.
All right, Heather, time saver. Well, that concludes our meeting today, 2 minutes early. Thank you all for participating. With that, we are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.